The Crusades were a series of religious wars fought between Christians and Muslims in the Middle Ages. These wars were fought for control of the Holy Land, which was considered sacred by both Christians and Muslims. The Crusades were a defining moment in European history, shaping the political and religious landscape of the continent for centuries to come. In this video, we will explore the history of the Crusades and the impact they had on the world. Footage of medieval Europe and the Middle East. The Crusades began in the late 11th century, when Pope Urban Roman II called for a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem from the Muslims. The Pope's call to arms was met with enthusiasm by many Christians, who saw the Crusades as an opportunity to earn salvation and glory in the eyes of God. Footage of medieval Christian soldiers marching to war. The First Crusade was launched in 1096, and over the next 2 centuries, a total of 9 crusades were fought. The Crusaders were motivated by a combination of religious fervor, political ambition, and economic gain. They believed that by reclaiming the Holy Land, they would be fulfilling God's will and securing their place in heaven. Footage of medieval Muslim soldiers preparing for battle. The Muslims, on the other hand, saw the Crusades as a threat to their way of life and their religion. They believed that the Christians were invaders who had no right to the land they were fighting for. The Muslims were also motivated by a desire to protect their homes and families from the Crusaders. Footage of medieval battles between Christians and Muslims. The Crusades were marked by brutal violence and atrocities committed by both sides. The Crusaders sacked cities and massacred civilians, while the Muslims engaged in guerrilla warfare and targeted Christian pilgrims. The Crusades were a holy war, but they were also a war of conquest and domination. Footage of medieval castles and fortresses. Despite the violence and bloodshed, the Crusades had a profound impact on the world. They brought new ideas, technologies, and cultures to Europe, and they helped to shape the political and religious landscape of the continent. The Crusades also had a lasting impact in the Middle East, where they contributed to the rise of Islamic fundamentalism and the ongoing conflict between Muslims and Christians. The First Crusade was launched in 1096, in response to Pope Urban Roman II's call for a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem from the Muslims. The Crusaders were a diverse group of people, including knights, peasants, and even women and children. They set out on a long and dangerous journey across Europe and Asia Minor, facing many challenges along the way. Footage of medieval Crusaders marching through Europe and Asia Minor. The Crusaders faced many obstacles on their journey, including harsh weather, disease, and attacks by bandits and hostile armies. Many Crusaders died before they even reached the Holy Land. Footage of Crusaders fighting battles in the Holy Land. When the Crusaders finally arrived in the Holy Land, they faced a formidable opponent in the form of the Muslim armies. The Crusaders were outnumbered and outmatched, but they were motivated by their faith and their desire to reclaim the Holy Land. Footage of the Siege of Jerusalem. The Crusaders launched a siege of Jerusalem in 1099, and after a long and bloody battle, they succeeded in capturing the city. The Crusaders massacred the Muslim and Jewish inhabitants of the city, and the streets ran with blood. Footage of Crusaders establishing the Kingdom of Jerusalem. With the capture of Jerusalem, the Crusaders established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, a Christian state in the heart of the Muslim world. The Kingdom of Jerusalem would last for almost 200 years, but it was constantly under threat from Muslim armies and internal conflicts. Footage of the aftermath of the First Crusade. The First Crusade was a brutal and bloody affair, but it was also a defining moment in European history. It marked the beginning of a long and complex relationship between Europe and the Middle East, and it set the stage for centuries of conflict and cooperation between Christians and Muslims. The success of the First Crusade inspired many more Europeans to take up the cross and journey to the Holy Land. The Second Crusade was launched in 1147 in response to the fall of the County of Edessa to the Muslims. The Crusaders were led by King Louis Roman VII of France and Emperor Conrad Roman III of Germany, but their campaign was a disaster. They were defeated by the Muslim armies and forced to retreat. Footage of the Second Crusade. The Third Crusade was launched in 1189 in response to the fall of Jerusalem to the Muslim armies. The Crusaders were led by 3 of the most powerful monarchs of Europe: King Richard the Lionheart of England, King Philip Roman II of France, and Emperor Frederick I of Germany. Footage of the Third Crusade. The Third Crusade was marked by some of the most famous battles of the Crusades, including the Siege of Acre and the Battle of Arsuf. The Crusaders were able to recapture some of the territory lost to the Muslims, but they were unable to retake Jerusalem. Footage of the Siege of Acre and the Battle of Arsuf. The Third Crusade ended in a truce between the Christians and Muslims, known as the Treaty of Ramah. The Christians were allowed to keep control of the coastal cities, but Jerusalem remained under Muslim control. Footage of the Treaty of Ramah. The Second and Third Crusades were less successful than the First Crusade, but they had a lasting impact on the world. They brought new ideas, technologies, and cultures to Europe, and they helped to shape the political and religious landscape of the continent. Footage of medieval Europe and the Middle East. The Crusades also had a profound impact on the Middle East, where they contributed to the rise of Islamic fundamentalism and the ongoing conflict between Muslims and Christians. Footage of modern-day conflicts in the Middle East. The Crusades were a holy war, but they were also a war of conquest and domination. They were a defining moment in European history, and their legacy continues to shape the world today. The Fourth Crusade was launched in 1202, with the goal of recapturing Jerusalem from the Muslims. However, the Crusaders never made it to the Holy Land. Instead, they ended up sacking the Christian city of Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Footage of the Fourth Crusade. The Fourth Crusade was led by the Venetian Republic, which had promised to transport the Crusaders to the Holy Land in exchange for payment. However, the Crusaders were unable to pay the full amount, and the Venetians convinced them to attack Constantinople instead. Footage of the Venetian Republic and the Crusaders. The Crusaders attacked Constantinople in 1204, and after a long and brutal siege, they succeeded in capturing the city. The Crusaders looted and pillaged the city, taking priceless treasures and destroying many of its historic buildings. Footage of the sacking of Constantinople. The Fourth Crusade was a disaster for the Christian world. It weakened the Byzantine Empire, which had been a bulwark against Muslim expansion in the East. It also caused a permanent rift between the Eastern and Western Christian churches, which had previously been united. Footage of the aftermath of the Fourth Crusade. The Fourth Crusade was a turning point in the history of the Crusades. It marked the beginning of a decline in Christian power in the Middle East, and it contributed to the rise of the Ottoman Empire, which would eventually conquer Constantinople and much of the Middle East. Footage of the Ottoman Empire. The Fourth Crusade was a tragic and shameful episode in the history of the Crusades. It showed that the Crusaders were not always motivated by religious fervor, but were often driven by greed and ambition. Footage of medieval Europe and the Middle East. The Crusades were a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, with both positive and negative consequences. They brought new ideas, technologies, and cultures to Europe, but they also caused immense suffering and contributed to centuries of conflict between Christians and Muslims. The Crusades had a profound impact on the world, shaping the political and religious landscape of Europe and the Middle East for centuries to come. The legacy of the Crusades can still be felt today in the ongoing conflicts between Christians and Muslims in the Middle East. Footage of modern-day conflicts in the Middle East. The Crusades brought new ideas, technologies, and cultures to Europe. They helped to spark the Renaissance, which was a period of great intellectual and artistic achievement in Europe. Footage of the Renaissance. The Crusades also had a lasting impact in the Middle East. They contributed to the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, which is still a major force in the region today. Footage of Islamic fundamentalism. The Crusades were a holy war, but they were also a war of conquest and domination. They were marked by brutal violence and atrocities committed by both sides. Footage of medieval battles and atrocities. The Crusades were a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, with both positive and negative consequences. They brought new ideas, technologies, and cultures to Europe, but they also caused immense suffering and contributed to centuries of conflict between Christians and Muslims. Footage of medieval Europe and the Middle East. The legacy of the Crusades is a reminder of the power of religion and the dangers of religious extremism. It is also a reminder of the importance of understanding and respecting different cultures and beliefs. Footage of modern-day interfaith dialogue and cooperation. The Crusades were a defining moment in European history, and their legacy continues to shape the world today. Footage of modern-day Europe and the Middle East. Thank you for watching this video on the Crusades. We hope that it has given you a better understanding of this complex and fascinating period in history.